Welcome back to the table, and Ryan and I have some news for you. We just played Cascadia Landmarks. This is the long-awaited expansion for Cascadia. We were just talking about how long it's been since Cascadia came out, and then what this expansion is doing.
Yeah.
How much it was worth the wait.
Sure.
And we have some things to share about our experience.
It was definitely worth the wait. I'm glad that we got more content for Cascadia. Not that the formula was getting stale at all. The base game still holds up. And in fact, even when you add in the Landmarks expansion, you still do feel like you're just playing the base game.
Yep.
It does not overcomplicate. It's not like some expansions now, all of a sudden you have another action, or all of a sudden you have a whole nother. It's nothing like that. What it is a set of landmarks and these special landmark cards that are going to give you a little bit of bonus scoring once you build an area or corridor, as it's called, that's at least 5 of a terrain type. Now, this is something that you wanted to do in the base game, but they didn't really.
A little bit.
They didn't really give you a benefit for getting to 5 necessarily.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that I think is actually ironically easily overlooked in the base game is that scoring of your largest section of a certain habitat, because you've got these scoring cards staring you in the face.
Right.
And even in the base game, those scoring cards were not complicated, but they were intricate enough to where you're like, okay, how do I have to score the, okay. And you're like, oh, it gets the final scoring. You're like, oh, that's right. I needed to build a big forest and a build river, and I didn't do that. Given the fact that these landmarks are in part of the game now, it re-emphasizes that aspect. Not to mention, it is cool because you're able to, if you're the first one to do it, you have your first pick at some of these cards that kind of enhance a lot of the end game scoring as it stands.
They give you a lot of in-game scoring options. There's some that make your corridors bigger. There were some that let you combine 2 corridors. There's some that give you points for having specific animals on specific terrain types. And you'll notice that there are a set of these for each terrain type, and each terrain type gets a miniature as well. So like David said, the first person to do it gets their first choice, but everybody can.
Yes.
If everybody gets to 5 forests, they'll all get one of these little trees to put on their board. Now, the other twist here is that when you claim one of these, it has to go on the tile that you just placed. So if you're planning one of those turns where you're getting a tile that helps and then putting the animal right on it, you can't do that. You have to choose to put the animal tile on there or to put that tree on there. And once the landmark is on a tile, no animal can ever go on that tile. So it does kind of block off some of the spaces on your board as far as like solving that puzzle goes.
Yeah, it also opens up some options too. If you play your map right, or your tiles, you can have options open like, oh, I'm waiting for a 5th forest here, I'm waiting for a 5th this. So in those turns where you do look and you're like, oh, I would regularly have to take a tile and not take the animal, you might forego the animal this time and just take the tile in this animal, and it works out because you don't have to place it.
Yeah, and there are a variety of these different scoring conditions, and you're going to be setting them out at the start of the game. And that's really the major thing that this game adds. So it's not, like I said, it's not a whole nother level of the game, but it is rewarding you for doing something you want to do, or kind of giving you a little bit of direction. And also, scoring more points is always good, and having new ways to score points is good.
Yeah, and speaking of new ways to score points, that's the other big thing this game does, is it has more options for the 5 scoring categories, as it were. So all of those animals from the base game, they have them again, but they just have 3 more of each. And you can see I feel, at least the ones I played with, the base game also had some ones that took some like, okay, how do I have to place these? You had to kind of figure it out. These ones felt like it ramped it up just maybe a tiny bit. There are some very specific scoring situations. Like this one scores for long runs of salmon. Then you can have bears along that run of salmon.
Yeah.
I don't know why the salmon would want the bears there, but
it helps the ecosystem.
That's true.
These always kind of scaled up a little bit in complexity. I think these are a little bit harder and more challenging than the ones that came. I think we've got E, F, and G for some of these. So in the new one, so it does kind of ratchet up the complexity of how your scoring is going to work. Some of these even give negative points to the thing, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. For instance, the elk here, it's 13 points, but then it's -1 point for every adjacent animal in that little group. So first of all, you have to have 3 elk in a little cluster, and then effectively, you want them out on the outskirts of your tiles where they're not next to anything else.
Yeah.
Cool thematically.
The grizzly bear needs you to have a completely empty space next to each bear you score, which is interesting as well. So these definitely do change up the puzzle of the game. but the actual gameplay of Cascadia has remained. So we always like to talk about who it's for and who it's not for. So I think this is definitely still for you if you're a fan of Cascadia. It does not ratchet up the complexity. It does not give you so much more to think about that you don't feel like you're playing Cascadia anymore.
Yeah, I would say if you're one of those people who thinks of expansions and goes, oh no, I really like the base game. Expansions overcomplicate things. This doesn't do that. Like Ryan was saying, it's effectively, this is more Cascadia. Right. It's going to give you more options. If you played a ton of Cascadia and you're looking for just different cards to come up for scoring opportunities, this has got you covered. In fact, you can just play it that way. Yeah. You don't have to use the landmarks. But I can't imagine personally ever playing this game again without all the things that we just played with. Just mixing all these cards in and always having the landmarks.
They're just fun. They're just little bonus optional things. If you never hit 5 in a territory, and even if you do, they're optional. You don't have to cash in for one of them.
Right, and they can be very opportunistic because you could hit that and you might not have even looked, and you look up there and go, oh, well, that would actually be very helpful. Yeah, so it just takes what you experience with Cascadia and gives you more of it. So if you like that, you'll like this. Now, who it's not for, I would say...
Well, we said this when we did the first Cascadia. It's for everybody. It's hard not to find somebody that loves Cascadia.
I would agree. I felt that the original Cascadia, the year it came out, I think I ranked it very high on my own personal list.
We called it one of the best gateway games of all time.
I do think it is. I do think it's one of the best gateway games ever. I think what this does is it takes that and makes it gives it a little bit more longevity, which is exactly what you'd want in a sort of a go-to gateway game. Because if you play this with people for the first time and they're like, oh, that was really good. And then they're like, you want to play again?
Yeah, right.
You could say, we'll add this to it. And you're not only just changing the scoring this time, but you're adding the landmarks. And I think it's such an easy, simple thing to add to it that most people are going to like that. With that said, I would say the people, if there must be someone who this isn't for, I mean, if you don't like these sort of the sort of flat-out formula of drafting a few things, putting them in, and building sort of tiles out into an area, you're probably not going to like Cascadia.
And what I was going to say, too, is if you were looking forward to this expansion, thinking that it was going to open up the gameplay to a whole other level of heaviness and it was going to turn light Cascadia into a medium game, we've seen expansions do that.
This doesn't.
This is not one of those expansions. This just seamlessly blends in with the very simple gameplay that makes Cascadia so captivating to people. And while it does add more elements to the puzzle, it doesn't turn it into a, Euro-y brain burner or anything like that.
Yeah, I would say, to put that succinctly, this does not turn the game of Cascadia on its ear.
Right.
So if you didn't like it or you were really wanting a ton more, this isn't going to give you a completely different experience than what Cascadia was.
So for me, that's the point.
Yeah.
I like how integrated the expansion felt, that we didn't have to learn a whole new rule set. We didn't have to learn about new actions or new contingencies. Oh, if this happens, then this, it's still the very, very simple draft play. The only new step is check if you have 5 in a row or 5 in a group, you can get a little bonus. That's really it.
I would say, this may not be accurate, but you could potentially just put the landmarks out and just tell everyone, we're playing Cascadia again. Let me know when you get 5 of a certain thing.
Right.
And then when they do, you go, oh, well, you can choose one of these now. You don't even have to teach it.
Right.
You could just play it. I mean, because the game is so quick and streamlined, especially if you're playing it too, you could do that and then you get a game under your belt and then go again.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great addition. It is what I was looking forward to as far as giving you something else to do with your map, but definitely not in an overwhelming way.
Yeah, and a great reason to get Cascadia back to the table.
Absolutely.
For as much as we loved it, we'll be honest, Cascadia doesn't hit our table all that often.
It's tough to get a game back to the table pretty often.
It is difficult, but it gave us reason to do so, and I think we're both happy that it did.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions at all about this expansion, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, as always, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.